"Sir, the family photos are in the trash can outside." Mia Johnson said those words so quietly that, at first, Alessandro Moretti thought he had heard something else. The billionaire mafia boss stood in the middle of his estate's stone courtyard, one hand resting on the golden watch that had belonged to his father, his black suit perfectly pressed, his expression unreadable as always. Behind him, the Grand Moretti mansion rose like a monument to generations of power, tradition, and carefully protected secrets. But the 8-year-old daughter of the housemaid was not looking at the mansion. She was holding something that did not belong in a trash can. A cracked wooden frame. An old family photograph. Alessandro looked at Mia, expecting to see a child holding another forgotten decoration from the property. Instead, he saw the photograph inside the frame, and everything around him seemed to become silent. He did not recognize the picture because it was old. He recognized it because it was impossible. The photograph showed his family standing together years ago. His younger self, his parents, people he remembered, people he had lost. But there was something wrong. Someone had been cut out of the image. Not accidentally. Not from age. The edge was too clean. Too deliberate. Alessandro slowly reached for the frame, but he stopped before touching it. For a man who controlled businesses, negotiations, and an entire empire built on loyalty, a small piece of paper behind cracked glass had somehow become the one thing he could not understand. Mia watched his face carefully. She was not trying to impress him. She was not asking for anything. She simply thought something important had been thrown away by mistake. "I found it near the back gate," she explained. "The truck was coming, and I thought someone might want it." Alessandro turned the frame over. Dust covered the back. A small tear marked the corner. Then he saw something written underneath the wood. A sentence in faded ink. "For Alex, never let them erase us." His breathing changed. Not dramatically. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Mia noticed. She noticed because she always watched small things. Her mother had taught her that in big houses people often paid attention to voices and money, but they forgot to notice what was left behind. Alessandro read the words again. Alex. Almost no one called him that anymore. Not in public. Not in business. That name belonged to another time. A time before the walls of the mansion became filled with expensive paintings and carefully chosen decorations. A time before every room looked perfect. He looked toward the mansion windows. For the first time in years, he wondered if perfection had been hiding something. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked. Mia pointed toward the large trash container near the garden path. "There were more things inside," she said. "Other frames too. But this one was broken." Alessandro looked back at the photograph. More frames. More memories. More things someone had decided no longer belonged. Before he could ask another question, Victoria Moretti stepped onto the courtyard from the back entrance. Her elegant smile appeared instantly, calm and polished. "Alessandro, what is going on?" she asked. Her eyes moved from him to Mia, then to the old frame in his hand. For a brief moment, less than a second, her expression changed. Surprise. Concern. Fear. Then it disappeared behind a perfect smile. "Oh," Victoria said softly. "That old thing? It was part of the renovation cleanup. Nothing important." Alessandro looked at her, then at the photograph again. Nothing important. But the words written behind the frame said something different. "Never let them erase us." And for the first time in a long time, Alessandro Moretti wondered what someone had worked so hard to make him forget. Victoria stepped closer with the same calm expression she wore at charity events, business dinners, and every public appearance where the Moretti family name needed to look flawless. She reached toward the old frame in Alessandro's hand, but he moved it slightly away before she could touch it. The movement was small, almost invisible, but everyone noticed. Especially Mia. The little girl stood quietly beside the garden path, holding the strap of her worn blue backpack, watching the adults carefully. She did not understand the history behind the photograph. She did not know why a simple picture had changed the atmosphere of a mansion worth millions of dollars. She only knew that something important had been thrown away. Alessandro, Victoria said gently. You know how old houses are. Things get replaced. Pictures, furniture, decorations. We were simply updating the space. Her voice was soft, reasonable, the kind of voice people trusted because it never sounded angry. Alessandro looked at the mansion behind her. The windows reflected the afternoon sunlight. The gardens were perfectly arranged. Every stone, every flower, every piece of furniture seemed carefully selected. But now he started noticing something else. The absence of things. How many pictures were removed? He asked. Victoria paused. It was only a brief pause, but Alessandro caught it. I do not know the exact number, she answered. The designer handled most of it. A normal answer, a believable answer, but something about it felt wrong. Because Victoria did not ask what picture he was holding. She did not ask who was in it. She already knew. Alessandro looked down at Mia. Where did you find the others? Mia pointed toward the back gate. Near the same place. Some were face down. Some had broken glass. Victoria looked at Elena Johnson, Mia's mother, who had just stepped outside after hearing the conversation. Elena immediately looked worried. I am sorry, Mr. Moretti. I told Mia not to disturb anything. She was only trying to help. Alessandro turned toward Elena. Your daughter did not break anything. The words surprised everyone, including Mia. For years, people inside the mansion had learned to apologize quickly. Staff members apologized before anyone accused them. They apologized because powerful families often did not need to raise their voices to make people feel small. But Alessandro was not looking at Mia like a problem. He was looking at her like a witness. Victoria noticed that change. Children see things differently, she said with a polite smile. Sometimes they attach meaning to things that are not important. Mia looked at the frame again. But it was important to someone. The courtyard became quiet. Alessandro looked at her. Why do you think that? Mia carefully pointed at the back of the photograph. Because someone wrote on it. She tapped the faded words with one small finger. People do not write messages on things they do not care about. Alessandro did not answer. He knew she was right. Later that afternoon, he walked through the main hallway of the mansion alone. The family portraits on the walls were new, expensive, perfect. Every image showed the Moretti family as if nothing had ever changed. But the old frame in his hand told a different story. He stopped in front of one empty section of wall near the staircase. The paint looked slightly different there. The color was almost the same, but not quite. A small shadow remained where another frame had once hung. Alessandro touched the wall lightly. Someone had not simply removed an old photograph. Someone had removed the evidence that the photograph had ever existed. Behind him, Mia stood quietly with her mother. She looked at the empty space and then at Alessandro. That spot looks lonely, she said. Alessandro turned toward her. For a moment, he almost dismissed the comment as a child's imagination. But then he looked back at the empty wall. Lonely. That was exactly what it looked like. A space where something belonged. A place where someone had been erased without anyone admitting it. Alessandro returned to his office and placed the old frame on his desk. He did not call Victoria. He did not accuse anyone. Not yet. He opened a drawer containing old family records and photographs. Most of the documents were organized perfectly, but one section was strangely incomplete. Several dates were missing. Several names had been removed. Then he found a folder with a faded label hidden beneath newer files. The name on it made him stop. Isabella Moretti. Alessandro stared at the folder for a long moment. He had no memory of why that name felt familiar. But he knew one thing. Someone had not thrown away a photograph. Someone had thrown away a person. And now he had to find out why. The folder with Isabella Moretti's name stayed on Alessandro's desk for several minutes before he finally reached for it. He had opened thousands of documents in his life. Contracts, business agreements, financial reports, records that could change the direction of entire companies. But this old folder felt different. It was not about money. It was about something much harder to control. Memory. Alessandro opened the first page slowly. The paper was older than most of the documents in his office. The ink had faded slightly. Inside were dates, notes, and records that seemed incomplete. Some pages were missing. Some information had been removed. The strange thing was not what the folder contained. The strange thing was what it was missing. Alessandro looked at the family records again. The Moretti family history was usually detailed down to the smallest event. Birthdays, celebrations, anniversaries, important decisions. Everything had a place. Everything had a record. Except Isabella. Her name appeared only in this hidden folder. Nowhere else. Not in the official family archive. Not in the recent photographs. Not in the documents displayed inside the mansion. It was as if someone had carefully removed every trace of her existence. A knock came at the office door. Alessandro closed the folder before Elena Johnson entered with a tray of coffee. She stopped when she saw the old documents on the desk. For a moment her expression changed. Not fear. Something closer to recognition. Alessandro Noticed. You know this name, he said. Elena looked down at the tray. Mr. Moretti, I do not think it is my place to talk about family matters. That answer bothered him more than a direct explanation would have. Because people usually said they did not know something when they truly did not know. They said it was not their place when they knew more than they wanted to reveal. Elena, Alessandro said calmly, I am not asking you to betray anyone. I am asking you what you saw. Elena remained silent for a moment. Then she looked toward the hallway where Mia had disappeared earlier. My daughter notices things because she listens when adults think nobody is listening. Alessandro looked at the old photograph on his desk. What did she notice? Elena carefully placed the coffee down. She noticed that the house changed. Alessandro waited. Elena continued. Before the renovation, there were more family pictures. Some rooms felt different. Some names were spoken. Then one day, things were simply gone. Alessandro leaned back. Why did nobody say anything? Elena gave a small, tired smile. Because in houses like this, people learn what questions are safe to ask. The words stayed with him. Not because they were dramatic, because they sounded true. Later that evening, Alessandro walked through the mansion again. This time, he was not looking at what was there. He was looking at what was missing. He entered the old family hallway near the staircase. Mia was there, carefully cleaning a small shelf with a cloth while waiting for her mother. Alessandro noticed she had found another detail. What is that? He asked. Mia pointed to the wooden surface. A mark. He looked closer. A small circle had been carved into the wood behind where a picture frame used to sit. Why is that important? He asked. Mia shrugged slightly. I do not know. I just think people leave things behind when they move something. Alessandro examined the mark. It matched a symbol on the back of the old frame. A small family emblem. The same one that appeared on his father's ring. He felt the first real connection between the clues. The picture. The empty wall. The hidden folder. The symbol. They were not separate accidents. They were pieces of the same story. That night, Alessandro asked the mansion staff for the renovation records. Victoria had said the changes were simple updates. He wanted to know exactly who approved them. The records arrived within an hour. Most of the paperwork looked normal. New furniture, new lighting, new decorations. But one document caught his attention. A request for removal of outdated personal displays. The approval signature belonged to Victoria. Alessandro stared at the page. It was not proof of a crime. It was not enough to accuse anyone. But it was enough to ask a different question. Why would someone call family memories outdated? The next morning, Alessandro returned to the old frame and examined it more carefully. Behind the photograph, hidden beneath the backing paper, he found something that had slipped into the corner. A small piece of fabric. A child's bracelet. The name carved into the metal charm was clear. Isabella. Alessandro froze. Because now the missing person was no longer just a name in a folder. Someone had once been a child. Someone had once been loved. and someone had tried very hard to make everyone forget. Alessandro Moretti had spent his entire life learning one rule: never react before you understand the entire situation. In his world, emotions could cloud judgment, and assumptions could create mistakes that could not easily be corrected. That was why he did not confront Victoria after finding the bracelet with Isabella's name. He did not accuse her. He did not raise his voice. He simply watched, and that was exactly what made Victoria uncomfortable. Over the next 2 days, Alessandro paid attention to things he had ignored for years. He noticed how quickly Victoria changed the subject whenever Isabella's name appeared. He noticed how the staff avoided certain hallways. He noticed how every new family portrait in the mansion had the same carefully chosen arrangement. Alessandro was not looking for a confession. He was looking for a pattern. Then he decided to create a small test. He placed 3 objects on the long wooden table in his office. The first was a brand new silver picture frame from the recent renovation. The second was an expensive decorative box purchased by the interior designer. The third was an old wooden box covered in dust, with a faded family symbol carved into the side. He asked Mia to come in after school while her mother finished her work in the mansion. "I want to ask you something," Alessandro said. "Which one of these things was hidden?" Mia looked surprised. She did not expect a question like that. She walked around the table slowly. She did not touch the expensive items. She looked at the corners, the dust, and the places where someone had recently moved things. After a few seconds, she pointed at the old wooden box. "That one," she said. Alessandro studied her carefully. "Why?" Mia looked at the box. "Because someone wanted people to forget it was there." Her answer was simple, but it stayed with him. She did not say it was valuable. She did not say it was important because it belonged to a rich family. She only noticed that someone had tried to hide it. Alessandro opened the box. Inside was an old piece of fabric, a small family document, and a note written in faded ink. The handwriting matched the message on the back of the photograph. Before Alessandro could read the entire note, Victoria entered the office. "What is going on here?" she asked. Her tone remained polite, but her eyes immediately went to the box. "Alessandro noticed." Again, she recognized something before she was told what it was. "Just looking through old family items," Alessandro replied. Victoria smiled. "Some things are better left in the past." The sentence sounded harmless, but Alessandro heard something else. A warning. Mia looked at the box and quietly said, "But if something was important before, does it stop being important just because someone hides it?" Nobody answered. Victoria's expression stayed calm, but her fingers tightened around the folder she was holding. Alessandro saw it. Tiny movement, a small reaction, but enough. Later that evening, Alessandro reviewed the mansion security footage. He did not expect to find anything. The renovation team had followed official instructions. Everything looked normal. Then he found a clip from 3 months earlier. Victoria was standing in the family hallway with the interior designer. They were not arguing. They were discussing the renovation calmly. That was what made the moment more interesting. The designer held a list of items to remove. Victoria pointed toward specific frames on the wall. "Those ones first," she said. Alessandro paused the recording. He zoomed in on the list. One line caught his attention. "Remove old family displays from East Hallway." He looked at the screen again. This was not random cleaning. Someone had made decisions. Someone had selected memories. Someone had chosen what the family would remember and what they would never see again. But Alessandro still needed more. A suspicion was not proof. A feeling was not evidence. He closed the laptop and looked at the old photograph. On his desk, the missing person in the picture was no longer just a mystery. She was a question that someone had worked very hard to prevent him from asking. Then his phone rang. It was the head of family records. His voice sounded uncertain. "Mr. Moretti, I found something unusual in the archive." Alessandro stood still. "What?" The man hesitated. "There is a record that was removed from the official family files, but there is a copy in the old storage system." Alessandro looked at the photograph. Whose record? The answer came quietly. Isabella Moretti. For the first time, Alessandro understood that the photographs were only the beginning. Someone had not just removed pictures from the walls. Someone had rewritten the story of his family. And now he was about to discover who had been holding the pen. The next morning, Alessandro Moretti entered the old family archive room for the first time in years. The room was hidden beneath the west side of the mansion, not because it was secret, but because nobody had a reason to visit anymore. Dust covered the shelves. Old folders rested behind glass doors. Family records that once represented generations of Moretti history now sat untouched in silence. Alessandro had built his life around information. He believed every decision, every partnership, and every risk could be understood if he had the right facts. But standing in that room, he realized there was one part of his own life where the facts had disappeared. The archive manager placed a thin folder on the table. This was found in the old storage system, he explained. It was marked for review, but it was never added to the official records. Alessandro opened it carefully. Inside were copies of documents connected to Isabella Moretti. There were medical records, family correspondence, and a photograph that had never been displayed. It showed Isabella standing beside Alessandro years earlier. She was smiling. He was smiling too. It was a version of himself he barely recognized. A man who looked less guarded, less distant. On the back of the photograph was a date and a handwritten note. The family grows when we remember everyone who belongs. Alessandro stared at the words. Someone had tried to remove Isabella from the family story, but these small pieces kept appearing. The old photograph, the bracelet, the hidden folder, the missing records, they were all pointing in the same direction. Someone had not destroyed the past. Someone had carefully edited it. Alessandro continued reading. Then he found something that made him stop. A document from the renovation company. It listed the items removed from the mansion during the recent changes. Most of the items were ordinary. Old furniture, decorative pieces, damaged frames. But one line was different. Personal family displays removed under private instruction. There was no explanation, no reason, only approval. Victoria Moretti. Alessandro closed his eyes for a moment. It was not enough to prove everything. A signature could mean many things. A renovation decision could be explained in many ways. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. That afternoon, Alessandro returned to the main hallway where Mia had first noticed the empty spaces. He found her sitting near the staircase while waiting for Elena to finish work. She was drawing quietly in a small notebook. Alessandro sat nearby. "Mia," he said, "why did you think those pictures mattered?" The little girl looked up from her drawing. "Because people do not usually throw away things they love." Alessandro listened. "Sometimes they keep broken toys," she continued. "Sometimes they keep old letters, even if they do not use them anymore." She looked toward the empty wall. "So when someone throws away a picture, I think they are trying not to remember something." Alessandro did not respond immediately. Her words were simple, but they described exactly what he had been discovering. A few minutes later, the interior designer arrived at the mansion for a scheduled meeting. Alessandro asked about the renovation. The designer smiled confidently. Everything was done according to instructions. The goal was to create a cleaner, more modern image for the Moretti family. Alessandro looked at the paperwork in front of him. Who gave the instructions? The designer hesitated. Mrs. Moretti handled the final decisions. Another small crack. Another piece falling into place. That evening, Alessandro reviewed every available document connected to the renovation. Then he found an email from the designer. The message was short. Remove anything connected to the old family image before the new portraits arrive. Alessandro read the sentence again. Old family image. Not damaged items. Not outdated decorations. Family image. Someone had decided that certain memories did not fit the future they wanted to create. He looked at the old photograph beside his desk. The person cut out of the picture was no longer a forgotten face. She was the center of the mystery. Then another file arrived from the archive manager. A scanned document from years ago. At the top was Isabella's name. At the bottom was Alessandro's signature. But the date was from a time when he remembered nothing about this part of his life. Alessandro stared at his own signature and felt the weight of the discovery. Someone had not only hidden Isabella from his family, someone had hidden the truth from him. And now he needed to find the missing piece that connected his name to the secret. Alessandro Moretti had spent years building an empire where every detail had a place. Numbers were recorded. Agreements were documented. Decisions were carefully stored. Nothing important was supposed to disappear without someone knowing. But now he was standing in the center of a mystery inside his own family, and every new discovery revealed the same disturbing truth. Something had been removed, not by accident, not because of age, because someone wanted it gone. That evening, Alessandro returned to his private office with the old photograph, the bracelet, and the documents spread across his desk. For the first time, he placed all the pieces together. The photograph showed Isabella. The bracelet carried her name. The archive contained records that were never officially added. The renovation documents showed someone had ordered the removal of old family displays. Each piece alone could be explained. Together, they created a story that was becoming impossible to ignore. Alessandro called the family records manager again. "I need everything connected to Isabella Moretti," he said. "Not only official records, everything." The manager hesitated. "Mr. Moretti, some of those files were sealed years ago." Alessandro looked at the old photograph beside him. "Then find out who sealed them." The next morning, a new set of documents arrived. Among them was a family agreement created years earlier. It was not a normal business contract. It was an internal family document. The title was simple: Family Reputation Protection Agreement. Alessandro read every page carefully. The agreement allowed certain family information to be managed privately to protect the Moretti name. At first glance, it looked like a document designed to prevent gossip and unwanted attention. But then he found the section that mattered. It allowed selected records, photographs, and public family materials to be reviewed and updated. Dated. A harmless word. A dangerous word when used by people with power. Because hidden inside the paperwork was the ability to decide what the world would remember. Alessandro leaned back in his chair. The problem was no longer one missing photograph. The problem was that someone had created a system where memories could be edited like documents. Later that afternoon, Alessandro walked into the kitchen and found Mia helping her mother organize supplies. He noticed the little girl was wearing the same blue backpack she always carried. The same backpack that held her small notebook and the things she considered important. "Mia," he asked, "why do people keep old things?" She thought for a moment. "Because sometimes old things are the only proof something happened." Alessandro looked at her. "Proof of what?" Mia looked down at the notebook in her hands. "Proof that someone was there." The answer stayed with him, because that was exactly what Isabella had become. Someone who had been there. Someone who mattered. Someone whose existence had slowly been pushed away until people stopped asking questions. Before leaving the kitchen, Alessandro noticed something else. Mia had drawn a picture in her notebook. It was a simple drawing of the mansion. But on one wall, she had drawn a missing picture frame. "Why did you draw that?" Alessandro asked. Mia shrugged. "Because the house looks different when something is missing." That night, Alessandro reviewed the family agreement again. He noticed one detail he had missed earlier. The document required approval from two people. One signature was his mother's. The other was from a family representative. Alessandro checked the name. Victoria Moretti. The discovery changed the direction of everything. Victoria had not simply helped decorate the mansion. She had been involved in deciding what parts of the family story remained visible. But Alessandro still needed more. He needed evidence that connected the paperwork to the missing person. A reason. A motive. Complete picture. He contacted the hospital listed in Isabella's old records. The response came several hours later. The administrator sounded uncertain. Mr. Moretti, we found something unusual. There is a record under Isabella's name, but it does not match the official family information we have. Alessandro stood from his desk. What does that mean? The answer was quiet. It means someone changed the record after it was created. Alessandro looked at the photograph again. The missing person was no longer only a family mystery. It was a truth hidden behind paperwork, signatures, and carefully chosen words. And now he knew one thing for certain. Whoever removed Isabella from the family history did not simply want her forgotten. They wanted the entire world to believe she had never belonged at all. Alessandro Moretti had spent years making difficult decisions without hesitation. He knew how to read people, how to recognize hidden intentions, and how to separate facts from assumptions. But this time, the person he needed to understand was someone who had been standing beside him for years. Victoria Moretti had never appeared suspicious. She was always calm, always prepared, always careful with her words. That was exactly why Alessandro stopped looking for emotional reactions and started looking for evidence. He did not confront her. He did not ask questions she could easily answer. Instead, he quietly began rebuilding the story from the beginning. The first thing he did was review the renovation records again, but this time he followed every name connected to the changes inside the mansion. The interior designer, the archive manager, the family assistant. Every person involved had received instructions from someone, and every path led back to the same place. Victoria. But Alessandro knew a name was not enough. Connection was not proof. He needed something stronger, something that could not be explained away. He requested copies of old financial records connected to the family agreement. Hidden among years of routine expenses, he found payments made to preserve what was described as family image management. At first, the phrase seemed harmless. Wealthy families often protected their reputation. But one payment caught his attention. It was made shortly after Isabella's records were changed. The amount was not the important part. The description was, Archive Correction Services. Alessandro stared at those words. Correction. Not removal. Not deletion. Correction. A word that made something permanent sound temporary. He continued searching. Then he found an email exchange between Victoria and the interior designer. It was not dramatic. There were no angry messages. No obvious confession. Just a calm conversation about replacing old family displays. But one sentence stopped him. The new arrangement should reflect the family we are building, not the family we left behind. Alessandro read it twice. The family we left behind. That sentence revealed more than Victoria probably intended. She was not simply changing decorations. She was choosing which version of the family deserved to exist. Later that day, Alessandro walked through the garden and found Mia sitting near the stone pathway, drawing in her notebook. He noticed she had drawn the old picture frame again. You remember that frame? He asked. Mia nodded. Yes, it looked like someone wanted to save it. Alessandro sat down nearby. How can you tell? Mia looked at the drawing. Because it was not broken when I found it. It was placed under other things. Alessandro became quiet. That detail mattered. The frame had not been accidentally damaged. It had been covered, hidden, forgotten on purpose. Mia continued drawing. Sometimes people hide things because they do not want others to see them. But sometimes they hide things because they do not want themselves to remember. Alessandro looked away for a moment. The words were simple, but they touched the part of the mystery he had avoided. Maybe the people who erased Isabella were not only hiding her from others. Maybe they were trying to control what Alessandro himself remembered. That evening, Alessandro called the hospital administrator again. This time, he asked a different question. Who changed Isabella's record? There was a pause. Then the administrator answered carefully. The request came through a legal representative connected to the Moretti family office. Alessandro already knew what he would hear next. Whose name was on the request? The answer came slowly. Victoria Moretti. For the first time, Alessandro allowed himself to accept what the evidence was showing. Victoria was not standing near the mystery. She was inside it. but he still needed to understand why. The next step was not revenge. It was discovery. He needed to know who Isabella really was, what had happened to her, and why so many people had agreed to erase her. Alessandro closed the old family folder and placed the photograph on top. The man who once protected his family name above everything else now faced a different choice. Protect the image of the Moretti family, or protect the truth that the family had tried to bury. And before he could make that choice, he needed one final piece of evidence that would reveal the full story. Alessandro Moretti had spent the last several days collecting pieces of a story that someone had worked very hard to hide. But now he finally had enough evidence to stop searching in the shadows. He knew the truth could not remain locked inside old folders and forgotten records forever. The question was no longer whether Isabella had been erased. The question was who would be forced to admit it. On the evening of the family dinner, the Moretti dining room was prepared exactly as it always had been. The long wooden table, the polished silverware, the carefully arranged flowers. The room represented everything the family wanted the world to see. Strength. Tradition. Unity. But that night, Alessandro saw something different. He saw a room built around a missing piece. Victoria arrived first, wearing the same calm expression she always carried. She greeted everyone warmly and acted as if nothing had changed. Alessandro watched her carefully. He noticed how comfortable she looked, how certain she was that the past would remain buried. His mother arrived moments later, followed by several family representatives. They all believed this was another ordinary family meeting. They were wrong. Alessandro placed a small folder beside his plate. Then he placed the old wooden frame next to it. The room became quiet. Victoria looked at the frame and immediately understood. "Alessandro," she said softly, "is this really necessary?" He looked at her. "That depends. Is the truth necessary?" Nobody answered. Alessandro opened the folder. He placed the documents on the table one by one. The renovation records, the archive requests, the family agreement, the hospital documentation. The room that once belonged to the people who controlled the story now became the place where the story was finally examined. Victoria remained calm. "You are misunderstanding a situation that was handled years ago," she said. "There were personal reasons, family reasons."
Alessandro nodded slowly.
"That is exactly what I wanted to hear." He turned toward the interior designer who had been invited to the meeting. "Tell them why the old photographs were removed." The designer looked uncomfortable. "I was following instructions." Victoria looked at him. "You were hired to improve the home. That is all." Alessandro placed the email on the table. The one that mentioned removing anything connected to the old family image. The designer looked down. The room became silent. Victoria finally lost the certainty in her expression. "Not completely, just enough." Alessandro continued. "This was never about decoration. It was about deciding which memories were allowed to remain." His mother looked at the old photograph. "Alessandro, you do not understand what happened." He looked at her. "Then, explain it." For years, people had protected the Moretti name by avoiding difficult conversations. But now the family name itself was demanding answers. The final document Alessandro placed on the table was the one that changed everything. It was a hospital record connected to Isabella. The original version, not the altered copy. The record showed that Isabella had never been removed from the family because she disappeared. She had been removed because certain people wanted control over the story. The room went completely silent. Victoria looked at the document, then at Alessandro. "You do not know the full situation," she said.
Alessandro answered calmly.
"Then tell me the full situation." For the first time, Victoria had no prepared explanation. No perfect sentence. No simple excuse. Alessandro turned toward the family members around the table. "A family is not protected by hiding the people who belong to it." His voice remained controlled. "A family is protected by having the courage to admit when it was wrong." Then the dining room doors opened. Everyone turned. A woman stood there holding an old envelope. She looked older than the photograph on the wall, but Alessandro recognized her immediately. Isabella Moretti, the person whose name had been removed, the person whose memories had been hidden, the person everyone had been told to forget.
Alessandro stood frozen.
For years, he had believed he was searching for a missing piece of the past. But the truth was standing in front of him. She had not disappeared from history. History had been changed around her. Isabella looked at the old photograph on the table and quietly said, "I wondered if anyone would ever ask what happened to me." Alessandro could not answer immediately, because after all the documents, all the evidence, and all the searching, the most important truth was not written on paper. It was standing right there. And now the Moretti family had to face the person they had tried to erase. The Moretti dining room remained silent after Isabella walked through the doors. For years, Alessandro Moretti had lived with the idea that missing pieces of his family history were simply painful memories from a difficult time. But now the person who had been removed from photographs, records, and conversations was standing in front of him. Not as a name in a folder. Not as a faded image behind broken glass. As a real person who had spent years watching the world move forward without her. Alessandro slowly stood from his chair. For the first time in many years, he had no prepared response. No business strategy. No carefully chosen words. Only a single question. Why did nobody tell me? Isabella looked around the room. She saw the same walls where her pictures had once hung. She saw the same family table where decisions about her life had been made without her. Because everyone believed they were protecting something, she answered quietly. They protected the family name. They protected the image. But they forgot there was a person behind the story. The words were not angry. They were heavier than anger. They were the words of someone who had waited years to simply be recognized. Alessandro looked at Victoria. For the first time, he saw the difference between protecting a family and protecting appearances. Victoria tried to explain. She said the decisions were made during a complicated period. She said the family was trying to avoid confusion. She said there were reasons behind every action. But Alessandro had learned something important during his search. Reasons could explain decisions. They could not erase the consequences. He turned toward the evidence on the table. The old photograph. The altered records. The renovation documents. The agreement that allowed people to control what the world saw. Every piece told the same story. Isabella had not been forgotten naturally. She had been removed intentionally from the family's visible history. Alessandro made a decision that changed the future of the Moretti family. He did not use his power to silence the people responsible. He used it to correct the record. The next morning, the family archive was reopened. The altered documents were reviewed by independent professionals. The inaccurate records were corrected. The removed photographs were restored. The people who participated in changing the family history were held accountable through proper legal and professional channels.
No threats. No revenge.
Only evidence and consequences. For Victoria, the truth meant losing the carefully created image she had built around herself. The elegant explanations no longer worked because the documents spoke louder than words. The interior designer admitted that the renovation decisions were not simply about style. The family representatives who approved the changes had to answer why they allowed one person to disappear from the official story. But the most important moment came back in the mansion hallway. The same hallway where empty spaces had once revealed what was missing. Alessandro stood there with Mia beside him. The old family photograph had been restored. This time, nobody was cut out. Nobody was hidden. The frame was placed back on the wall where it belonged. Mia looked up at the picture. "It looks better now," she said. Alessandro smiled slightly. "Why do you think that?" Mia looked at the photograph. "Because everyone is there." Alessandro looked at the little girl who had found the truth because she saw what others ignored. She had not solved the mystery with special tools. She had not forced anyone to listen. She simply noticed that something important had been thrown away. Elena Johnson and Mia remained part of the Moretti household, but not as people standing at the edge of someone else's world. They were treated with respect because they had always deserved respect. Alessandro never forgot the lesson hidden inside that old frame. Wealth could build large houses. Power could protect reputations, but neither could replace honesty. Months later, when guests entered the mansion, they no longer saw a perfect family image created to impress them. They saw a real history, a history with mistakes, missing chapters, and the courage to restore what was lost. And every time Alessandro passed the restored photograph, he remembered the little girl who picked up something everyone else had ignored. The smallest person in the room had been the one brave enough to protect the truth. She did not find a piece of trash. She found a piece of a family that was waiting to be remembered.